Hey everyone, this video is to review basic factoring. So whenever we factor, we have two steps. The first one is to look for a GCF, a greatest common factor. Remember, your GCF can be a number, it can be a variable, or it can be both. It's just something that can divide into every single term. Terms, remember, are things that are separated by addition and subtraction. After we've looked for a GCF, we then look at our number of terms. And we always finish with the question, am I at my most factored form? Sometimes you're going to have multiple factoring steps included in these. Make sure you get it down to the most factored form. So when we have two terms, we look for the difference of two squares or the sum or difference of cubes. Key ideas here is when I'm talking about the difference of two squares, it has to be subtraction, otherwise it doesn't work. And then when it's cubes, it can be the sum or the difference of cubes. Whenever you have three terms, it's called a trinomial. It always factors as two binomials, and we do that through guess and check. And then if we have four terms, we always factor through grouping. So a couple examples just to get us started. The first thing that we look for is, do I have a GCF? So remember, terms are separated by addition and subtraction, which means that would be a term, and that would be a term. We look for something that can divide into both of these. What divides into both 16x squared y and negative 64z squared y is we can actually take out the number 16 from both of them and a y. So when I factor that, I'm going to be left with x squared minus 4z squared. We always want to ask, am I at my most factored? If you look at the inside now, you see two terms. When I have two terms, I'm looking for either perfect squares or perfect cubes. X squared, 4, and z squared are all perfect squares. It's the difference of two squares because we have subtraction. So the difference of two squares is always going to factor as two binomials, one with a plus and one with a minus. That 16y that we've already taken out, we just need to make sure we bring it down to the next step. From there, I ask the question, what squared is going to get me to x squared? The answer is x, so it goes in the first position of both of these. What's going to square to get me to 4z squared? 2 squared is 4. Z squared is z squared. So it's going to be 2z for both of these. What you should notice with difference of two squares is that what's underneath or what's inside of your parentheses should always match perfectly except the signs. One should be a plus and one should be a minus. This is because if we were to FOIL this back out, our middle term would cancel out, which is why we only go down to two terms. So this is going to be our final answer, 16y times x plus 2z times x minus 2z. In our second example, we are once again able to take out a GCF. This time, our GCF remains as 16. So after I factor out my 16, remember, factoring is to undo the distributive property, so kind of like division. We're going to be left with x cubed plus 8k cubed. And what you should notice is that all of these inside the parentheses are perfect cubes. So I bring down my GCF of 16, and it factors as a binomial, so 2 terms, times a trinomial, 3 terms. We ignore our signs to start. I ask what cubed will get me to x cubed, and that goes first. And then what cubed will get me to 8k cubed is 2k. For inside our trinomial, the 3 terms, we square the first, We multiply them together to get the middle term. And then we square the second one to get the last term. So 2k squared is going to be 4k squared. And then the pattern for your signs is same, different, addition. So I do the same sign, which means I start with plus. I do the sign that's different from plus, which would be minus. And then the last one is always addition. Third example, I'm going to look for my GCF first, which is going to be 3. Leaves me with x squared minus 6x plus 8. I have a trinomial. I know it's going to factor as 2 binomials. The reason that this one is pretty simple is because our first term is x squared. There's no number in front of the x squared. The only way to multiply to get to x squared is going to be x times x. From there, I'm looking at my signs. I am multiplying to get a positive number. That means they're going to be the same signs. I'm adding to get a negative, which means that both of my signs, because they're going to be the same and adding to a negative, are going to be minus minus. And then the two numbers that multiply to give me 8 and add to give me 6 are 4 and 2. For this trinomial, it's a little bit more challenging because we don't have a GCF here. I can't take the 3 out. And it's multiplying to get 3x squared. So I know I'm going to have 2 binomials. The only way to multiply to get 3 is 3 times 1, so that's going to be 3x times x. I'm multiplying to get a positive number. This tells me that my signs are going to be the same. Because I'm adding to a positive, both signs should be positive. The only tricky thing here is the 6, because I have multiple factors of 6. I have 1 and 6, or I have 6 and 1. Because this is a 3x and an x, you have to consider the order in which they go in, because when you go through and FOIL it, it's going to get a little bit different depending on which order you put things in. I also have 2 and 3, or 3 and 2. If I were to guess using 1 and 6, remember when we FOIL, we really are looking for the middle term here. So it's going to be the 3x times whatever this number is, and then whatever this blank is times this x. So if I started with this 1 comma 6, 3x times 6 is going to give me 18x, which is going to be way too big. If I were to try it the other way around, 3x times 1 will give me 3x, 6 times x will give me 6x. That's not going to work. That's going to give me 9x when I add them together. The first one, when I did it, would have given me 19x. If I tried 2 and 3, 3x times 3 would give me 9x, 2 times x would give me 11x. So once you find the one that you're looking for, you don't even have to check anything else. I still have to show the work for it, so I'm going to do my guess, and then I'm going to check. So 3x times 3 is going to give me 9x. 2 times x is going to give me 2x, which equals 11x. We did our guess, we did our check. This is going to be our final answer. And lastly, when we have 4 terms, we want to group them together. So I group the first 2, and I group the second 2. And actually, what I should have looked for even before that, what we should notice here, is all of these numbers are divisible by 2. So I have a GCF of 2 that I can take out. So now I'm going to group together the first two terms and the second two terms. And we're kind of going to ignore this too. Just keep bringing it down until the very end. So what we're doing here is taking the GCF out essentially. So I have the 2 out in front. The GCF between x cubed and 3x squared is x squared. And what I'm left with is x plus 3. The GCF between negative 4x and negative 12, you always want your biggest term to be positive. So I'm not going to take 4 out, I'm going to take negative 4 out. What you should notice here is that we have now two terms here, and the things inside the parentheses match. So remember, terms are separated by addition or subtraction. The x squared and the x plus 3 are being multiplied. That counts as one term. The negative 4 and the x plus 3 are also being multiplied. That counts as one term. So the GCF between these two things is actually going to be x plus 3 because it's what they both share. Which means I can take out my GCF of x plus 3. And then I'm left with whatever's on the outside. I take x plus 3 from the first term, I'm left with x squared. I take x plus 3 from the second term, I'm left with negative 4. Now the one thing we have to do, as always, is be careful and ask, can I factor further? If you look carefully at this, you should be able to tell me x squared minus 4 can factor further because it's the difference of two squares, what we've already reviewed. I bring down the 2 and the x plus 3. Difference of two squares, I know two sets of parentheses, one with a plus, one with a minus. To get to x squared, that's x times x, and to get to 4 is going to be 2 times 2. Now I'm at my most factored form.